You know, in most countries, we pretty much take for granted that there's a line between church and state. But in Spain, that line gets, well, it gets incredibly blurry. There's this connection. It's so deep and so powerful, it basically acts like a shadow crown, a hidden force that's been shaping the country for centuries and, as we'll see, is still pulling strings from behind the scenes. And to really get a handle on this, we've got to start with a number that is just staggering.
400,000. That is the official estimate of children abused within the Spanish Catholic Church since just 1940. It's a direct symptom of the very unique and deeply embedded power structure that we're going to unpack right now.
So, yeah, that leads us right to the big question for this whole explainer. Because a power structure like this, it doesn't just happen by accident. It was built, it was designed. So how was this shadow crown forged? To get the answer, we have to go way back in Spanish history, where the seeds of this thing were planted a long, long time ago. All right, so this bond between Spain's monarchy and its church, it wasn't a coincidence. It was constructed, piece by piece, over centuries of conflict and strategy.
It really starts in the 6th century, when a Visigothic king converts to Catholicism. That's the first link. But that link gets hardened into a weapon during the Reconquista, that 700-year war against the Moors. By the time Spain is finally unified in 1492, being Spanish and being a Catholic warrior, they're basically the same thing. This wasn't just culture anymore, it became the state's official operating system.
So how did the monarchy keep that power locked down? Well, they came up with this really powerful ideological tool called limpieza de sangre, or purity of blood. The state started pushing this idea that even if former Jews and Muslims converted to Catholicism, their blood was still impure. It was a brilliant, if terrifying, political move. It created this permanent enemy inside the country that the crown could always point to justify its total control.
And to enforce all this, the monarchy built two incredible machines of control. First, you have the Spanish Inquisition. And here's the crucial part. It answered to the Spanish king, not the Pope in Rome. It was literally an arm of the state. And second, there was the Patronato Regio, which was a deal that gave the crown total say over who became a bishop and where the church's money went. Put those two together, and you've basically turned the Spanish church into a very wealthy, very loyal government department.
In the 18th and 19th centuries, the rest of the Western world was basically on fire with democratic revolutions, often fueled by those Masonic ideals of liberty and equality. But Spain was the great exception. It held on tight to its absolute monarchy, trying its best to resist that modern democratic tide that was washing over everyone else.
But for a moment, there was this incredible flicker of hope. In 1812, a liberal movement full of Masons drafted a really progressive constitution. For one brief, shining moment, it looked like Spain was actually going to join the modern world. It was a dream of a totally different future for the country.
And then, just like that, the dream was crushed. Only 2 years later, the restored King Ferdinand VII didn't just abolish the Constitution, he tore it up. He betrayed the very people who fought for him and launched this ruthless, brutal persecution of all liberals and Masons. And that single act, that betrayal, it didn't just suppress a movement. It basically supercharged anti-Masonry in Spain for more than a century, an animosity that would find its ultimate expression under the dictator Franco.
And this is where we find one of history's strangest political alliances. See, most fascist movements hated monarchies, but not in Spain. The Spanish fascists, the Falange, they actually revered the crown. They were led by aristocrats, and they saw the king as the ultimate symbol of national unity, imperial glory, all of it. And that's why the dictator Franco, after he won the Civil War, decided to restore the monarchy, eventually handpicking a Bourbon, Juan Carlos, to be his successor.
This paranoid worldview, this intense fusion of militant faith and raw state power, it's about to hit its most violent and absolutely terrifying peak in the 20th century under the dictatorship of General Francisco Franco.
So when Franco launches his coup against Spain's elected government, he doesn't sell it as a political power grab. Oh no. With the full-throated support of the church, it was pitched as a holy crusade, a sacred war to rescue Catholic Spain from that same old boogeyman, that imaginary team-up of Jews, Freemasons, and communists.
This made Franco's brand of fascism a real oddball, a rara avis, or a strange bird. You know, while Nazism and other fascisms in Europe were often godless or even anti-church, Spanish fascism was the exact opposite.
It was all in on a fundamentalist, hardcore Catholicism, with the secretive and very powerful lay group Opus Dei eventually calling the ideological shots. And the result? It was a horrifying campaign of what the regime called purification. Thousands of Freemasons were systematically hunted and executed. Hundreds of thousands of political enemies were rounded up, thrown into concentration camps and used as slave labor. And, in a truly chilling move, the children of the defeated Republicans were taken from their parents and put into Catholic institutions to have their bad ideas re-educated out of them.
So, Franco dies in the 1970s. Spain becomes a democracy. But does a power structure that was built over 500 years just pack up and go home? Or does it leave a kind of ghost in the machine of modern Spain?
Now, if that sounds like some kind of wild conspiracy theory, just listen to this allegation from a Spanish judge, Santiago Vidal. He claims that a full 1/3 of Spain's entire judicial system is made up of members of Opus Dei. I mean, that is a jaw-dropping claim about the scale of this group's alleged influence inside a core part of the Spanish state.
And this isn't just some abstract idea. It has very real consequences. Remember those thousands of abuse claims we started with? Well, when a newspaper exposed them, the Spanish church hired a law firm to run its internal investigation. And whose firm was it? It was run by a prominent, high-ranking member of Opus Dei. To critics, this just looked like a system protecting itself, not seeking justice.
So all of this has created this huge paradox in Spain today. The country is basically living in two different realities at the same time. There's a real ghost in the machine here.
On the one hand, if you just look at the surface, you see a modern secular society. Fewer people go to church, there's a priest shortage, and the country is known for being super socially progressive. But then, on the other hand, that old militant ideology is still having very real, and sometimes very violent, effects. We're talking about vicious media campaigns against artists, harassment of women at health clinics, and even the firebombing of a theater just because a comedian dared to criticize the church.
And you can literally see this in the data. While reported hate crimes that target LGBTQ+ people have been stable or even falling across most Western Europe, in Spain they've been rising, year after year. That makes Spain a real outlier, and it suggests that those old ideological wars, they're still being fought, with very modern and very painful consequences. So this shadow crown wasn't built in a day. It was welded together over centuries of war and ideology and control. It's outlasted monarchies, republics, and dictatorships. And all of that leaves us with one last, really tough question. After all that history, all that time, can a bond that deep ever truly be broken?